You've been taught that the American Civil War was about slavery. You've been taught it was about states' rights. You've been taught it was the North's moral crusade against the South's evil. Here's what nobody teaches you. Both sides thought they were defending freedom. Both sides read the same Constitution and saw completely different words. Both sides believed God was on their side. And 620,000 people died because of a question the Founding Fathers couldn't answer in 1787. This war didn't start because Americans hated each other. It started because they loved the same idea and couldn't agree on what it meant. The story you know goes like this. The North wanted to free the slaves. The South wanted to keep them. They fought. The North won. Slavery ended. Clean, simple, wrong. The real story is about a 70-year moral debt that an entire nation refused to pay. Every generation kicked it forward, hoping the next one would deal with it. Compromise after compromise, bargain after bargain. Until 1860, when there were no more compromises left. Here's the question nobody could answer. Can a nation founded on the idea that all men are created equal survive when millions of those men are property? The founders knew this question would destroy America, so they did what humans always do with impossible problems. They postponed it. And postponement has a price. Picture this. You're in Philadelphia, 1787. The Constitutional Convention. Brilliant minds designing a new nation. Then someone mentions slavery. The room goes silent. Northern delegates want it banned. Southern delegates threaten to walk out. No South means no Union. No Union means Britain picks off the states one by one. So they make a deal. The Constitution never uses the word slave. It says other persons. It counts enslaved people as 3/5 of a person for representation purposes. It allows the slave trade to continue for 20 more years. Short-term gain, the United States of America exists. Hidden cost, the Constitution now protects slavery without naming it. This becomes the pattern. The Missouri Compromise of 1820, the Compromise of 1850, the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Each one a Band-Aid on a wound that keeps growing. Here's what most history books leave out. These weren't evil men refusing to do the right thing. They were terrified men choosing survival over principle. They genuinely believed the Union would collapse if they pushed too hard. And they were probably right. But each compromise made the next one harder. Each delay made the debt bigger. Think about your own life. That problem you're avoiding, that conversation you're postponing, that choice you're delaying because dealing with it now seems impossible. The founders did the same thing, except their postponed problem killed 2% of the entire American population. By 1850, there were no more roads left to kick the can down. Now here's where it gets complicated. By 1860, cotton represents 60% of all American exports. It's the oil of the 19th century, and it's all grown by enslaved labor. The South isn't just rich. It's the richest region in the Western world per capita. Southern planters live like kings. Their wealth rivals European aristocracy. But here's the catch nobody talks about. Most Southerners don't own slaves. In fact, 75% of white Southern families own zero enslaved people. They're small farmers, shopkeepers, workers. So why did they fight? Because the South's entire social structure depends on one thing. Being white means you're not at the bottom. Remove slavery, and suddenly poor whites face economic competition from 4 million freed people. Meanwhile, the North is industrializing. Factories, railroads, wage labor, immigrant workers. A completely different economic system. Two Americas, one nation, growing further apart every year. The South looks at northern factories and sees wage slavery, workers trapped in poverty, no land, no independence. The North looks at southern plantations and sees actual slavery, human beings as property. Both sides think they're defending freedom. Neither side can imagine living under the other's system. This decision solved one problem and created 3 more. Short-term gain. Both regions get rich in their own ways. Hidden cost. 2 incompatible economies sharing one government. Eventually, one system has to win. Then, in 1852, a book appears, Uncle Tom's Cabin. It sells 300,000 copies in the first year. It shows Northerners the human cost of their cheap cotton shirts. The South bans it, calls it propaganda, lies. But the damage is done. The moral argument is now in plain language. Ignoring it becomes harder. And this is where history quietly changed direction. November 1860, Abraham Lincoln wins the presidency. He gets 40% of the vote. He doesn't appear on a single ballot in 10 southern states. The South didn't just lose this election, they weren't even allowed to participate in it. Here's what Lincoln actually promises. No new slave states. Slavery can stay where it exists, but it can't spread. The South hears something different. Your economy is finished. Your way of life is dying. Your political power is gone forever. Within weeks, South Carolina secedes. Then Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas. They're not starting a war. They think they're preventing one. They believe they're doing what the founders did in 1776, leaving a government that no longer represents them. Lincoln faces an impossible choice. Let them go, and the United States fractures forever. Force them back, and you're killing Americans to preserve a union they don't want. He chooses preservation. April 12, 1861, Fort Sumter, South Carolina, a federal fort in Confederate territory. Lincoln sends supplies, just food, no weapons. The Confederacy sees it as an invasion. They demand surrender. The fort commander refuses. At 4:30 a.m., Confederate artillery opens fire. Nobody dies in the bombardment. It's almost polite as wars go. But both sides now have their proof. The South, the North is invading. The North, the South fired first. Here's what nobody expected. Both sides think the war will last 3 months, maybe 6. One big battle, a clear winner, terms negotiated. The Battle of Bull Run, July 1861. Civilians from Washington pack picnic baskets and ride out to watch, like it's a sporting event. Then the shooting starts. Real bullets, real blood, real screams. The civilians run. The soldiers realize this isn't going to be quick, but they're too deep to quit now. The war becomes a meat grinder. September 17, 1862, Antietam, Maryland. The single bloodiest day in American history. 23,000 casualties in 12 hours, bodies stacked in trenches, a creek runs red. Neither side wins. Both claim victory. Lincoln uses the victory to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. But here's what most people don't know. It doesn't actually free all enslaved people, only those in Confederate territory, which Lincoln doesn't control. It's not a moral crusade. It's a war strategy. It prevents Britain and France from recognizing the Confederacy. It recruits 180,000 black soldiers to the Union cause. Morality and strategy aren't opposites. Sometimes they're the same thing. July 1863. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. 3 days, 51,000 casualties, the Confederate high water mark. Pickett's charge 12,500 men walk across an open field into artillery and rifle fire. Half of them die in less than an hour. For nothing. General Lee retreats. The South will never invade the North again. But the war doesn't end. It grinds on for 2 more years. Why? Because neither side knows how to stop. Surrender means admitting all those deaths were for nothing. So they keep fighting, keep dying. Keep hoping the other side breaks first. Sherman's March to the Sea, 1864. The Union Army burns its way through Georgia. Not just military targets, farms, homes, railroads, total war. The message, you cannot win. Stop fighting. The South keeps fighting. April 9, 8. Grant offers generous terms. Confederate soldiers can go home. Keep their horses for spring planting. No trials, no executions. Lee accepts. The war is over. But this isn't the part written in textbooks. Here's what nobody wants to admit. The North didn't win because of moral superiority. The North won because of math. 22 million people versus 9 million, including 4 million enslaved. Industrial capacity. The North produces 97% of firearms, 94% of cloth, 93% of pig iron. Railroads 21,000 miles versus 9,000 miles. The South fought brilliantly. Better generals early on, better cavalry, home field advantage. None of it mattered. You can't win a war of attrition when your opponent has twice your population and 10 times your factories. And here's the uncomfortable part. The Emancipation Proclamation wasn't the pure moral victory we teach. It freed 0 slaves on the day it was signed. Border states like Kentucky and Missouri loyal to the Union, kept slavery legal until the 13th Amendment in December 1865. This doesn't mean Lincoln was a hypocrite. It means he was a politician navigating an impossible situation. He had to keep the border states in the Union while undermining the Confederacy. Morality and pragmatism got tangled together. They usually do. The South didn't lose because they were evil. They lost because their economy couldn't sustain modern warfare. But acknowledging that doesn't erase the central truth. They fought to preserve slavery. Every Confederate States Declaration of Secession mentions it explicitly. History isn't clean. It's layers of truth that contradict each other. Imagine you're alive in 1860. If you're a northern factory worker, you're scared. What if the South floods the market with cheap slave labor? What if your job disappears? If you're a southern small farmer with no slaves, you're angry. The rich planters control everything, but at least you're not at the bottom. At least you're white. Lincoln wins, and suddenly you're competing with 4 million freed people for land and work. If you're enslaved, you watch two white armies fight over your future. Neither side asked you what you want. Freedom is being used as a weapon, not a principle. Would you fight? Would you run? Would you wait and see? Here's the truth. Most people didn't choose based on morality. They chose based on fear, economics, and identity, the same forces that drive decisions today. We look at 1860 and think, I would have been on the right side. But the right side wasn't obvious then. It was buried under propaganda, economic interest, and social pressure. The soldiers at Gettysburg didn't think they were the villains or the heroes. They thought they were protecting their homes. History makes it clear. Living through it never is. The Civil War killed 620,000 to 150,000 Americans, 2% of the entire population. In today's numbers, that's 7 million dead. The South's economy was destroyed. It took a century to recover. Sherman's march left Georgia in ruins, railroads ripped up, cities burned, fields salted. Slavery ended, but it was replaced with sharecropping, convict leasing, Jim Crow laws. Legal slavery became economic and social slavery. Reconstruction, the attempt to rebuild and integrate the South, failed. By 1877, federal troops withdrew. The old planter class retook power. Black Americans were stripped of voting rights, land ownership, legal protection. The wound never healed properly. The Civil War didn't end. It just changed weapons. Federal power versus state power, still debated. Race relations still shaped by the choices made between 1787 and 1865. Economic inequality, still following the old Confederate borders. Here's the pattern. Postponing hard moral choices doesn't make them easier. It makes them catastrophic. The founders postponed the slavery question. 70 years later, 620,000 people paid for it. Every generation faces the same test. What problem are we postponing? What compromise are we making that our grandchildren will bleed for? The Civil War is a mirror. It shows us what happens when a nation refuses to reconcile its ideals with its reality. Lincoln's second inaugural address, March 1865, both read the same Bible and pray to the same God, and each invokes his aid against the other. The Almighty has his own purposes. Translation: maybe we were both wrong. Maybe this war was the price for 250 years of slavery. Maybe suffering was the only language left. If the founders had solved it in 1787, would America exist today? Or would immediate abolition have meant no United States at all? We'll never know. What we do know, kicking the problem down the road cost 620,000 lives. History doesn't repeat, but human nature does. The choices we avoid today become the catastrophes we face tomorrow.